Republicans meeting about the taxation process, and he said that he learned some things that he really had not understood, and so he thought people might benefit from hearing that again. If some of you've heard it before, I'm sorry, but there's some new faces and maybe people will learn some things. First of all, I'm from Paulding County. I graduated from Paulding County High School and I went to Berry College. I was going to be a vet and it didn't work out. I ended up being a janitor at the county. And after I was a janitor for a couple of years, I worked in many different offices, animal control, tax assessors, clerk of court. And then I landed in the tag office. So I was a tag clerk for 9 years and now I've been the tax commissioner for 16. So I hope that I'll get to stay there about 10 more years. The main responsibilities of the tax commissioner's office, they're two different things. That's the motor vehicles and the property tax. Believe it or not, motor vehicles causes the most work, the most headache, takes the most employees and the most assets. Basically, you know, as you all know, you buy your tags once a year, and if you get a new vehicle or sell a vehicle, you process the title there. One important thing to remember is that if you're titling the vehicle, you need to be there. It's really just like a closing for real estate. The title is a legal document like a deed, and your spouse can't sign for you, your children can't sign for you. People get upset because their wife comes and, you know, she can't sign. And so just keep that in mind. If it's your vehicle, it's your transaction, you can give a power of attorney for someone else to sign for you, but otherwise you have to be there. Paulding County's lucky enough to be one of the 13 emission counties. I know none of us like that. When they started that program 15 years ago, they were going to be adding new counties every few years. But once they added Paulding County, it kind of stopped. But there are 13 counties that have to meet emission standards and have the emission testing for their vehicles. The biggest change in the tag office since I've worked there is the way the taxes are levied. We did pay ad valorem tax every year on our vehicle on our birthday, as most of you will be aware, unless you're new to Georgia. And so they changed that in 2013. Now there's a title tax. So when you transfer ownership and transfer the title, you pay 7% of the state's value of the vehicle. So if you buy a vehicle for $1,500, but the state has it valued at $2,800, you get to pay on the $2,800. And that's, yeah. So that's collected when you process the title there to register your vehicle. If you have a vehicle that has high mileage, or it's been in an accident, or for some reason it might not hold the full value that the state would have for the average model, you can appeal the value, and you appeal to the tax assessors, and they can set a time to review the vehicle with you. They'll inspect the vehicle in many cases, and they can lower that value. Now, the pleasant surprise for you is you appeal after you've paid. So you go ahead and pay the 7% to me and my staff with our smiling faces while you're really fussing at us. And then you appeal to the assessors and you can get a refund if they lower the value. But basically that's the biggest change that's happened in motor vehicles, is the way that title tax is now collected up front, and you only pay the tag fee each year. A lot of people say you only pay the $20 tag fee, but I don't say that because I anticipate, nobody's told me this, so don't, run wild with it, but I don't say the $20 tag fee because I anticipate they'll raise the tag fee at some point, So you will just pay the tag fee. And trailers and non-titled vehicles, which are 1985 and older, do not pay title tax because they don't have titles. Trailers that weigh over 2,000 pounds do have titles. But under 2,000 pounds, they don't have a title, so you don't pay title tax. You still pay ad valorem on your birthday on those vehicles. And another big thing that causes confusion is insurance. In Georgia now, an insurance card is not proof of insurance, believe it or not. Proof of insurance is the information electronically downloaded to the state's database. So people do come in, and if their insurance company hasn't downloaded it, or if they download it and it's more than 30 days before you register it, it drops out, then the insurance is not there, and you have to get that straightened out. We do allow people to call their insurance and get it downloaded, all that kind of thing, but that's another thing that causes frustration for the public. But the tag office I have 20 employees. That includes me. 2 of those are part-time. The employees are cross-trained between property tax and tags. And overwhelmingly, the employees are in the tag office. Many days there's one lady in property tax and everybody's working in tags, other than during the height of the property tax season. So that's pretty much an overview of the tag office. Now, the property tax is what people may not understand how it works, or every step in how it works. It really begins with you. Taxation is done as the property stands on January 1st of a given year. So if you owned a house on January 1st and you sold it on January 3rd, you're going to get the tax bill because you were the January 1st owner. Now, at closing, most of you are familiar with the proration. The seller gives a credit for the number of days that they owned the house, and since they've given a credit, that leaves the buyer to pay the tax bill. But the seller and the buyer don't always understand what that means. So that's an agreement between the seller and the buyer. The state says the January 1 person is liable. So you get the tax bill, you get the late notice if the new person doesn't pay. But if they don't pay and you did give credit at the closing for what you owed, you can provide the deed and the closing statement showing that you gave credit for your portion and you signed the property away, and then no lien is created against you. So you're not harmed, other than you have to go through the process of getting the copies of the forms to us. So the way the property stands on January 1st is who is going to be taxed. And up until April 1st, you have the opportunity to make a tax return. That's where the citizens can be involved. If something has changed about your property, for the good or for the bad, you can turn that in to the tax assessors before April 1st and tell them to review your property. If no tax return is filed, it's deemed an automatic return, the same as last year. So nothing would be added or changed other than market fluctuations. Now, for the intricate details about how they assess your property, because people really get upset when their assessments go up, but we learned in 2008, 9, and 10 that they really get upset if they go down too. So they're upset no matter what happens. But in any case, if you disagree with your property assessment, they will mail you the assessment notice in June. You have 45 days to file an appeal. If you file an appeal and it's something as simple as, my garage burned and it was not there on January 1st, and you have proof of that, I think you can show that to the tax assessors. They'll review it, and they themselves will make that correction. If they look at it and they disagree with you, so you're still not in agreement, then your appeal goes to the Board of Equalization, which is an independent board. They don't answer to the tax assessors. They don't answer to the commissioners, although they're appointed by the commissioners. And but that board will hear the assessor's side and your side, and they make a decision. If you're happy with that, then the appeal ends. If you're still not satisfied, you have the right to appeal that to Superior Court. And then it will be heard in Superior Court, and once that decision comes down, that's final, and the appeal ends. So your participation is to make a tax return if something changes on your property. Be diligent in watching for that assessment notice, review that, and if you disagree, talk with the assessors and file an appeal if necessary. Once the appeals are done, there is no appeal to taxes. You know, people get their tax bill and they come and they want to pay in protest or they want to appeal this. Well, there's no appeal at that time. Your appeal is for your assessment. And the tax assessors do not establish the tax rate. Once they have finished with the values and the appeals are settled and we have what is Paulding County's value for that year, they give that information to the tax commissioner, the board of commissioners, the school board, and the cities of Hiram, Braswell, and Dallas. That way, each of those entities sees how much value they have for taxation. They will have reviewed their budget requirements for that year, and they see what millage rate is necessary, what tax rate is necessary to meet their budget obligations that year. And they will have to establish the millage rate. Excuse me. Several years ago, when things were growing every year prior to 2008, the digest would increase in value, so those home values were going up every year, and people were mad because that means higher taxes. And well, it only meant higher taxes if the millage rate stayed the same. If you've got more value in the same tax rate, you've got more tax. And none of those commissioners or school board people are here now, I think, so they just left the millage rate the same, and your taxes were higher each year. Several years ago, maybe 9 or 10 years ago, the state law changed with the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And they say now that if Vernon and Kim and their boards get higher value, they must roll back their millage rate to collect the same amount that they collected last year, unless they're willing to advertise to you that they're going to have a tax increase. And as a matter of fact, this year we've just finished that process up, and both boards advertised for a tax increase. Now, I'm not tied to the school board or the commissioners, I'm just the man with the information. So here's the information. The school board did leave their millage rate the same, but I have told people the last 3 years when they've left their millage rate the same, they also left their millage rate the same when the values plummeted. So they took the loss along with you, and they survived through that. They didn't raise their millage when the value went down. They're not raising or lowering their millage as it comes back up. They're trying to just ride it out and get back to where they were. Now, I'm not defending them or being negative. That's up to you people to discuss with them. But I want it to be fair to them because they held it the same all the way. So it's not like they're just shooting for a tax increase now. They're trying to get back to where they were. The Board of Commissioners advertised for a tax increase this year, and they had their public hearings. And then after receiving the information and the input, they opted to lower their millage rate. So they did roll it back. So I believe public participation, had some influence in that. And that's how the system works. They want to hear from you, both the school board and the commissioners, as they have to make these difficult decisions because they have to operate the schools in the county, and they have to be responsible to you, the taxpayers, and be as conservative as they can be. Now, the tax commissioner has no voice in how much your taxes are, other than I'm responsible for keeping my budget conservative, which I try to do. There is sometimes growth in the budget, but I rarely ask for anything new or additional. We try to survive like we survived last year. Since I've been in office, the population has gone from like 85,000 to 150,000. So obviously things had to change at some point. And a couple of years ago, I asked for 2 employees. I don't ask for employees every year. I ask for them when I believe it's really necessary. And as a matter of fact, I went before this group and told them I was going to ask for employees. I went before the commissioners and asked for the employees. And after some debate, I did get the employees. But, you know, I try to keep the budget conservative. New things will come down the pike that change the law or equipment's required. Howard helped me once because the state equipment is used in the tag office. And when they went on a statewide system back in 1999, the agreement was the state would provide the equipment and the upkeep on the equipment if we would join the state system. And so then at one point they just said, well, we don't have the money. We can't replace the equipment. And out of 10 of our windows, 6 of them were inoperable. And we were having trouble getting the equipment replaced. I talked to Howard and some of the other delegation, and they went to bat for us and got the equipment replaced. So, you know, things can happen to your budget each year, but basically we all try to be conservative, or, well, I'll speak for myself. I try to be conservative. So once the county, the school board, and the cities have reviewed their value, had their public hearings if necessary, because they have to have 3 public hearings if they are going to have a tax increase. Then they establish their millage rate, they turn that over to me, and I apply the millage rate to the values that the assessors provided, and that's when we calculate your tax bill. We're in the final process this week of getting those reviewed to make sure they're correct, and they're planning to go in the mail on September the 10th. So your tax bills will come out in September each year. The due date for Paulding County is November 15th, and once the due date passes, normally we have collected about 93%. After 90 days is when a lien is put in place against the property and against the owner. A 30-day notice must go out before the lien is created. So we send delinquent letters in January, and the liens are created in February. Before we get to the lien process, we've normally collected 96%. And then the last 3 or 4% is collected by, you know, reaching out by letter, payment agreements, and ultimately tax sale. So if it comes to the point that we have to seize the property, the tax commissioner serves as sheriff ex officio, because in Georgia the sheriff is the one who actually sells property. In the old days, the tax commissioner collected until the due date, and then he turned it over to the sheriff. Well, you know, that'd be good for me. I could just turn it over and the people who are late can deal with him. But they changed that 30 or 40 years ago, and most tax commissioners collect the delinquent tax. So we would seize the property by levying against it. That's to fill out a levy. We post the property with a sign that it will be sold at tax sale. It's advertised for 4 weeks, must be advertised in the legal organ of the county, which is the Dallas New Era. Some people move to town and they say, I've never heard of the Dallas New Era, I don't read that paper. Well, if you want to know what's going on the legal side of Paulding County, you need that paper, because that's the legal paper. After it's advertised 4 weeks, then the tax sale is in front of the courthouse, and it's the first Tuesday of the month along with the foreclosures. And the bid is opened at what is owed the county. At that time, there would be legal fees involved plus the taxes. And it's a public bidding auction. So if one person bids and no one bids against them, they can have the high bid. Or if there are multiple bidders, they can go until they stop. We have had properties that owed us $5,000 that sold for over $100,000. So what happens with that money if that happens? All we want is the $5,000 that is owed to us. And if it brought $100,000, if there are other lien holders recorded against the person or the property, they can claim the excess funds in the amount that's owed to them. if there are no other lien holders, then that person can claim the excess funds, and get the money back, because again, all we're interested in is the $5,000 they owed us. And not a legal lesson on tax sales, there's lots of details, and we recommend anybody that considers buying property at a tax sale consult with an attorney. But in general terms, if you're the high bidder at a tax sale, you cannot take possession of the property for 1 year. The person who has lost it has 1 year to redeem it, which they would have to pay you back plus 20%, and then you have to let them have it back. You know, you have no choice if they pay you plus the 20%.